Hey guys, Abby here. Today we're going to be going over a topic that I found really challenging during my private pilot training, and that I find that this way that I present it might help somebody else out and make your life a little bit easier with one less acronym that you have to remember. Disclaimer, again, I'm not a certified flight instructor, but I am an advanced ground instructor, and I am currently working on my commercial training. So I am a pilot and I do have some experience teaching, but what I say doesn't trump what your CFI or your flight school says. So without further ado, let's get right to it. So if you guys have ever heard the phrase tomato flames or ATOMATOFLAMES, you're going to be like, what? How am I supposed to remember that acronym with all of those letters, with 3 A's and 2 O's? If you're anything like me, that's not how I learn. And when you go for your check ride, if you just regurgitate that answer and you just list all that stuff, that's the rote learning level, and that's not really truly understanding the required equipment that you need to fly day VFR. And that's what we're going over right now. We are going over 91-205 required equipment and items for day VFR flying. So without further ado, let's get to it. All right, so for my check ride, when the examiner asked me what is the required equipment and items I need for day VFR for a flight, instead of just listing off ATOMATOFLAMES and trying to remember that under all the pressure of being at a check ride, I drew it out for him, and he loved it. I drew out each and every instrument and required equipment, and he was like, that's great, that's awesome, because it shows a deeper level of understanding. So that is exactly what I have done for you guys today. So if you think of 91-205, the required instruments and equipment that you need, and you think of it as if you're sitting in the cockpit looking at it, it's going to be way easier to visualize this and draw it out and understand it than just to rattle off the acronym ATOMATOFLAMES. And now I'm using a standard steam gauge training aircraft. If you have glass, that's okay. I'm going to show you a little thing I did for glass as well. But this is just how I kind of set it up. And you can see that it's broken down into sections. So on the left side here, we have the engine stuff. So you have your oil pressure gauge, your oil temperature gauge, your fuel gauge, and then your temperature gauge if you have liquid cooled engines. Now, some people might say the tachometer belongs over here. And if you understand that better, then put the tachometer over there. But for me, I put the tachometer because I associate it more with the complex aircraft, even though all aircraft have a tachometer. I associate the tach with the manifold pressure because I'm in commercial training and I fly a complex airplane more. But if that makes more sense to you, put the tachometer over here with the engine instruments. So now we've got our 4 engine instruments. Now let's move on over to the complex side. This is what I consider the complex part of an aircraft, which most of your training aircraft at the private pilot level, you're not going to have this stuff. Well, you'll have your tachometer, but you're not going to have manifold pressure gauge, and you're not going to have your landing gear indicator. But I clumped them together because I consider that kind of more the complex aircraft required equipment parts for 91-205. So now you have your engine gauges, you have your complex part of the aircraft. Moving on up, now we have our actual instruments. You have your magnetic compass, your airspeed indicator, and your altimeter. Pretty easy to remember. And if you have glass, you can put a glass one up there and draw it out kind of like that. Where you have your airspeed on the left side and you have your altimeter on the right. But again, we're kind of focusing more on just the steam stuff. And last but not least, we have our safety. Over here on the safety side, you have the ELT, your anti-collision lights, only if your aircraft is manufactured after 1996 are required. And then of course your seat belts. So engine instruments, regular instruments, your complex aircraft instruments, and then your safety side for the aircraft. Now there are a couple other additional things in 91-205, as if you're flying over water and you're outside the glide distance, then you need some kind of flotation devices. But usually this is ATOMATOFLAMES, drawn out in an easier, visually appealing way to remember it, kind of as if you're sitting in the cockpit and you have this stuff in front of you. And I drew that out on my check ride, and like I said, the DP was really impressed by it, rather than just trying to memorize a whole bunch of A's and O's in ATOMATOFLAMES. And that's it, everybody. Quick and easy, different way to remember tomato flames if you're more visual learner like I am. If you liked it and you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them below. Like and subscribe for more tips that I find might be helpful in your flight training journey. See y'all later.